Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are in our next to last unit, the last unit being the final exam. So this week what I'd like to do is a course review, kind of go over everything we've talked about in the course, and there was a lot of stuff. We jumped around a little bit, but I think we've covered a lot of things that come up in the world of a security manager, and I think that was the purpose for this course. So let's just jump in and talk a little bit about why we review in the first place. When we review what we do it for context, right? We want to be able to see a path from where we started to where we end, because that helps us put everything in context and hook it together almost like a train hooking together. And sometimes it's hard to do that when you have a unit, then you stop, you go on to the next subject, you want the next subject. They are all interconnected in the world of a security manager, and thus this review will hopefully help you put that into context. We're going to reflect on what we learned and why it's important to us, and maybe really what we missed. And I would be really welcoming of any suggestions on that. And in fact, I may require you to do that in some ways. And you also have a course survey where I fully expect you to tell me what I've done wrong and what I can do better, because I want to improve in my job just like you want to improve as a student. So we're going to reflect on what we learned and what was important to us and what we may have missed. We're going to do a little bit of repair work, and by that I mean that there are empty spaces. There are some things that we went over that you'll hear in this review and you'll say, oh, I missed that, or, oh, okay, now I know what he means, or maybe I better ask about that again because I just still don't get it. But it'll help us kind of fill in any gaps that we have so we have that continuity. And then the big thing is to really confirm that you understand some of these things so that you're more confident when you get into that job. You're not going to be a professional security manager the first day you set foot in that new job, be it cyber, be it safety, be it organizational security or physical security. You're not going to be a professional that first day. It takes time. But I want you to be able to go in that first day with the confidence, knowing that you will be on that path to professionalism as you go forward, and not be nervous thinking that you don't know enough to have that first job. I want you to be confident. So that confirmation is important as well. So we're going to put it in the context, we're going to reflect, we're going to repair, and then we're going to confirm. So week one, we met each other, right? The beginning of every love story, we met each other, right? Remember this when you're a security manager, and that's really the first step, is you really want to get to know somebody a little bit before you have to deal with them in a managerial sense. Be it as a coworker, be it as a peer, be it as a subordinate, or be it as a leader. You want to understand the person a little bit. And you also want to know what the rules of the road are, right? You want to make sure that you don't go in the first week and do something that screws you up on the new job, right? So you want to know the rules. And that's what that first week, most people are like, oh, that's just a blow off. We're just kind of taking a quick quiz on the syllabus. He wants to make sure we understand the syllabus and learn something about us, even though he's met most of us before. In context, making people aware of the rules and getting to know people is part of what's called security awareness, which is something that every security manager will do. You're going to teach people about the rules. You're going to make sure they're aware of what they need to do and what their responsibilities are. So that's really why we do that first unit. It's almost like security awareness, it's course awareness. We have written rules, full discussion of those rules in an open and friendly atmosphere. That's what you're going to need to do when you're a security manager. So that's kind of where we began. So even in that first week that seemed like a blow-off, there's an important lesson there that you need to be able to communicate well, get to know people, and be able to establish rules and understand the rules. So we really started our in-depth discussion, though, on enterprise security risk management. That is a term you will hear throughout your entire career, and it's an important concept to understand, because if you really want to be a security manager and you just go in and put up the cameras and put up the card readers and put the guards in place in the guardhouse, think you're protecting yourself, you really are putting up a false sense of security. It will come back to haunt you someday when you have an incident, and your boss is going to wonder why he hired you in the first place. Because you want to understand that everybody participates in their own security, and you can't know where all the risks and threats are to any business unless you own that business. And even then, there's a chance that people know more than you do. That's why you hire them. So if you are the security manager at a widget factory, you don't know where the parts for the widget come from, necessarily where they're stored, whether the most important parts of the widget. You need people to tell you that. That's what enterprise security risk management is all about. Partnering with people to understand what their risks might be, how they dovetail with yours, and to come up with mitigations together to really protect the company against the things that can honestly do them harm, rather than just these invisible boogeymen that just random guards and guns and gates are going to take care of. So you partner with HR. I mean, there's a risk in bad hiring, right? They do the background checks perhaps, or at least responsible for getting them done, and they help with the hiring. If you partner with them, maybe there won't be bad hiring. So maybe you'll be able to make sure that the people you bring in are not a safety hazard, a security hazard to others. EHS has a risk to chemicals perhaps at your company. Who knows what is used in the manufacturing of those widgets, and you need to understand that so that you can protect those things. R&D, we talked about the gold case, that gold came up missing and nobody really knew there was gold there except a very small handful of people. Understanding what needs to be protected, what research and development chemicals and or materials and or research products, meaning information that needs to be protected. That's the kind of in-depth discussion ESRM helps facilitate. Supply chains, the risk to raw materials and delivery and distribution channels. Well, it's really great if you can make a bunch of widgets, but if you can't sell them because you can't safely get them out of your facility without them being hijacked or stolen, then that's a problem. And then IT, the risk to information loss. Even the cybersecurity people don't know every bit of information, how important it is. You understand that there's information, and it may be tagged as, as critical, as sensitive, whatever your designations may be. But you don't know really how it fits in the puzzle till you talk to people and understand how important that information or that production system that you're protecting is. Finance, the loss of assets and capital is always a problem. Having those discussions is what ESRM is all about. It is partnering with other people so that you holistically look at what needs to be protected, what the real risks to your organization are, rather than things that you just assume to be general risks, like workplace violence, people breaking in, those types of things. You understand what needs to be protected because you've discussed it with the people who own those assets. And as part of that discussion, we read an article about ESRM, the Kent Howard article, which I really think all of you should print out and keep in your binder for your first job because it's a really good one. And again, if anybody wants to talk to Kent about that, please let me know. It really talks about the program elements of ESRM. To plan, you build, you monitor things, and then you respond. It's a circle of continuous improvement. You're constantly trying to learn what's out there, finding the right mitigations, grouping them together if you can so that you can save some time and energy and have one thing protect more than, or one mitigation protect more than one thing. For instance, if the transportation person says that one of the things that's most important to him or her are those trucks that are parked out back, and your engineering person says one of the things that's most important to him or her is the power generator that's out back, then perhaps you put a single fence around the back part of your facility, or you concentrate your security patrols, or you put more cameras around those two things that cover both of them, and you're using one mitigation, one effort to solve two problems. And then you constantly go back to see if things have been moved. Have the trucks been moved? Are the trucks no longer important because you're using trains now, right? Or have you contracted out the truck traffic so that you don't have any of your own anymore? They just come and go as they need to, and you're not responsible for them. Constantly monitoring and then responding, adjusting your security plan to the new information you learn. That's that circle of continuous improvement. From there, we went into a more in-depth discussion of several key partners. HR, I think, is probably the most critical, I would say, partner for a security organization. And oftentimes, security falls under HR or safety or engineering and even under IT, under a converged environment. But HR partnership is very important, mainly because you work on some of the same things, especially when it comes to investigations, right? They're people behavior issues. That's what security really works on. And so does HR in many ways. But HR as a partner is responsible for recruitment and hiring processes. Remember, the managers actually do the hiring. They're the ones who determine who they want to hire. HR just facilitates that, helps them pick some candidates, helps them do the background checks, helps them with the interview skills, and as a consultant on that. Workplace safety, especially in smaller organizations, falls to HR. It may be its own organization and not in others. But in organizations of normally less than 200 people, workplace safety would be a HR function, including the reporting, the mandatory reporting on safety. Employee relations, meaning discipline, compensation and benefits, compliance with labor law, making sure that if there's a union that it's represented properly and treated as such, and training and development, all HR functions that security may have some crossover into. And we really talk about crossover with these partners. And that crossover really gives us shared risks. So again, with background checks, bad hire means you're going to put trouble in the workplace. And that becomes your problem, Mr. Security Manager. An improper investigation means there's going to be a lawsuit, and you may be conducting that investigation. If both HR and security have parallel intake, this is a common problem in industry, where a person goes and complains to the HR person about somebody harassing them. And they walk to that HR office and they don't feel like they got what they wanted, so they walk to the security office and they make the same complaint, and HR and security aren't talking about this, then you both are doing the same investigation. You may come out with different answers, or one may hold the key that the other one is looking for in investigation. So that parallel intake is a problem. So when you discuss the shared risks, you can also have shared mitigations. Perhaps when complaints come in, you have a shared incident complaint portal that you use. And you go into a SharePoint and you list all the complaints that come in, just generally, the name of the complainant and the type of complaint it is. You don't need to go into detail in there, right, and open up, a lot of crossover of information. But then you'd be able to go in and say, oh, well, you were just in HR, right? Okay, let me go down and talk to them and see who's going to handle this for you. So that's the type of crossover, the shared risks and the shared mitigations that you can have with HR. We went on to talk about finance as a partner. Well, finance is money, and money tends to disappear. Fraud majors, you'll confirm that, right? That is what you're studying. Finance generally handles purchasing and procurement, where fraud can be very rampant, where you're buying things on the company's behalf, and sometimes people buy them on their own behalf with company money. They also forecast, so that as a security manager, you have to handle a budget. So they will help you forecast what your spend is, whether you're spending too much or too little, kind of on an ongoing basis. We talked about budgeting, some basic budgeting methods for security managers. Remember the line item budget, right? It could be zero-based, could be based on history. There's any number of ways, but that lesson was really designed to give you some familiarity and some comfort level. You're not going to be an expert at budgeting. Just understand that budgeting for a security organization, the general security budget, is not a complex thing. You just need to understand the difference between expense items, the everyday items, and capital items, those long-term investments in your business, and how to put them into your budget. Very basic stuff, but that was, again, a lesson of comfort. I don't want you to be all hung up when somebody says, okay, go work on the budget. Just relax, take a breath, and understand that they're not that complicated for security managers. We talked about IT as an ESRM partner, right? We talked a little bit about convergence, the IT and organizational security melding into one. I gave you my feelings on that. I'm not a big fan. I've since talked to Dr. Lubinsky about it. She is a big fan, and it's okay for professionals to agree to disagree on things. But she makes an important point that in many smaller organizations, convergence is just a fact, that the IT and the organizational security person are one and the same. So if indeed you're preparing yourself for the workforce, it's not a bad idea to understand both. IT takes care of network architecture and availability, digital space device provisioning, right? Getting you a computer, a laptop computer, a tablet, cell phone, and they handle the maintenance and planning for that. They take care of software and firmware vetting and assurance, right? Making sure you don't put rogue software that's going to hurt you onto your networks. They handle capital projects for IT, which sometimes can be rather big. I mean, some big software suites like SAP, ServiceNow, others that do really big, impactful things for an organization can be very expensive. They take care of process automation support. So if you're in a manufacturing environment, it's not like the old blacksmith anymore where someone's swinging a hammer. There's an automated process that will make that widget for you, and it is computer driven. And then they're responsible for cybersecurity, or I prefer to call it digital integrity, making sure that people from the outside are not doing you harm by trying to influence your network in a negative way. But let's look at some of those shared risks with IT. I mean, if the network, that architecture and availability, the network working, right? The fact that when you sign onto your computer, you can get to the internet, you can get to your programs. Well, access systems, card access systems, alarm systems, I call it CCTV here, it's actually video surveillance systems now, VSS systems, they run on a network normally. The network's not up. All of your security devices as a security manager will not be working. Okay? Digital device provisioning. You imagine if everybody was allowed to have whatever type of cell phone they wanted at a company. Now, there are some small companies that do that. The bigger ones do not. mainly because you'd have to have people that are trained in helping you with trouble with the device. So you'd have to have an Apple team and an Android team and a team for BlackBerry, still around, still hanging out there by a thread. But you need to have 3 teams rather than one that just worked on iPhones or one that just worked on Androids. So, and when you try to do an investigation, digital forensics, you'd need to have 3 different programs to look at 3 different types of devices where one will do, and it will speed up your investigations. So there's a shared risk of IT and for you, because for them, they'd have to have 3 times as many people, and for you, you'd wait 3 times as long, perhaps, for a forensic investigation. Rogue software, when they vet software and firmware, rogue software can be a route to loss. There's no question. As a security manager, loss prevention is a good part of your job. Capital projects, well, IT may buy some of your systems for you. Some of those digital systems, like digitized video, virtual instances of access control where it runs on a server rather in a data center shared with other people rather than its own individual server. All of these things are IT functions that spill over into the security world and vice versa. You have shared risks, so you have to look for shared mitigations. And finally, with organizations, we talked about facilities and engineering partners, right? They do the building designs and construction of new buildings, and the security layout may very well be impacted by that design. What if they put executives against the front windows of the ground floor with all their glass in front of them so they can have a nice view of a pond, but it also puts them in harm's way because they're behind nothing but glass in the front corner of a building. Responsibility, right? When facilities and engineering designs a building, they may not be thinking about how are you going to get an emergency response person in? How might you shut certain doors, lock certain areas automatically in the event of an active shooter? That is a shared risk, shared opportunity. If you can get in on the ground floor to talk about building design, right? That is a huge impact on your security. Your crime prevention through environmental design, CPTED, right? The whole idea of designing security into a building is a reason in and of itself to partner with facilities and engineering. But on the facility side, they do repairs and maintenance. And if your guard arm, if your gate's not working, if one of your turnstiles coming into a manufacturing plant where people have to run a badge and then clicks them through a locked door, that's not working, you don't have great security. When it comes to capital project management, I can think of no other organization besides payroll, perhaps, and direct procurement, buying the stuff that actually makes your product, and that may not even be the case. Engineering facilities generally has the largest budget and the largest capital budget of any organization. It was true at Slippery Rock when we looked at that budget, if you remember correctly. Make friends with your facilities and engineering partners because they hold a lot of purse strings and there's a lot of crossover for shared risk and shared mitigations between the 2 organizations. To the regulatory environment. So regulations have penalties, standards have operational consequences, and internal controls have customer quality considerations. What does that really mean? Regulations are things that you must do. They are the laws. You must, if you're a ladder manufacturer, you must put a rating of weight on that ladder. It must be a certain amount, and you must be able to prove that your ladder can hold that much weight. Right? On a standard, what you have is perhaps a UL listing on a product, or some other independent authority shows that you have gone through even more rigid testing on that ladder, that it holds even more, that the standard is above and beyond the legal requirement, and you voluntarily have that organization test, and you can put their seal of approval on your product. Internal controls is more like the 11 herbs and spices in Kentucky Fried Chicken. You want it to taste the same at every restaurant, and therefore you use the same controls every place that you produce that. Trade secrets we learned about are hard, very hard to protect, and in some places they're almost impossible to protect. So trade secrets need to be protected from getting out, because once they are out, you can't necessarily expect to be able to sue someone who stole your trade secret, right? The only way to know what regulations, standards, and internal controls are in place in any organization is through talking to that ESRM partners. There are likely some engineering regulations, certainly some safety regulations. There are likely some HR standards. They may have an ISO standard or some other SHRM standard that they apply to their work so that they can show that they're doing the right things for the employees. And then internal controls, you need to understand your product, and you're only going to get that from the manufacturing folks. So talking to your ESRM partners is important to understanding the regulatory environment, because you are responsible for making sure that you stay within your regulations, your standards, and your internal controls. From there, we moved on to the rather uncomfortable discussion on external partners and what do police really think of security. Can you have a totally open relationship with the police? And I think we found the answer to be no, and I don't mean that to say that we should distrust the police. I would never say that, and I think that they are excellent partners in many ways. But the reputation of a local PD may impact what model you use for your interactions with the police. If you remember the Sarim Pressler articles on the different models of how you interact with the police, I suggest you kind of keep that and you start to think about the first job you get when you settle in and you understand what the police department is all about. You set a model, be it a hybrid of one of those 8. They had an 8th one that they came up with, which was pretty good actually. But figure out how you want to interact with the police, because it's an important relationship, and it's one you need to establish right out of the chute. If you don't establish it right on the first meeting, then you're in for trouble potentially if the police department tries to take advantage of the model and perhaps use you for things that you just shouldn't do or aren't comfortable doing. We went on to talk about your own security team. If you remember correctly, we talked about proprietary teams and contracts and hybrid teams. And oftentimes a hybrid model is the best model. I can't think of any student who won't tell you that they want to have a proprietary model where everybody works for them, because then they can make sure they get paid right and they have the right training. But remember, where there are proprietary employees, there is work and there is liability. And liability shifting is a big part of how you design your security team. You want to make sure that you have the right people in the right place, and that if there are certain positions that might create a great deal of liability, either because people need to be trained regularly, or they have insurance issues with those roles, they're customer-facing roles that might cause you grief, whether they're armed or unarmed, all those things relate to liability, and you may want to shift some of that liability to a contracted model. There are also co-employment issues. We talked about co-employment in the fact that you should not directly discuss the wages or benefits of guards with guards. You discuss that with their guard company if you've contracted that out, and you put it in your contract and you monitor to make sure that company is doing what they said they were going to do as far as pay and benefits. But don't ever have those discussions directly with contracted employees, because they are not your employees. And in the end, if they believe they are and they find a court that sees that you treated them such, you may have to pay them ongoing benefits in pensions, retirement, medical benefits, and other things that you hadn't budgeted for and you didn't count on. Just a few weeks ago, we talked about business enablement, and for some of you, this is kind of a new concept in that you are matching any task to the function that's best positioned to do it, rather than the one who traditionally does it. So, for making sure that people don't leave ladders up after hours, that in some places is a safety concern, as it should be. The safety person shouldn't have to go out and do patrols every night if your security people are already doing that. If you have walking patrols through a facility at night so that you can check for break-ins, fires, floods, famines, whatever you're looking for, if you train your security officers to report ladders that are left up or machinery that's left plugged in that shouldn't be, any safety violations, you can enable the safety people to do their job better, and it doesn't impact you, and in fact, it probably makes your officer even more effective. Salting sidewalks. Anybody who thinks that somebody should get out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning to salt sidewalks, when it's not in a major storm, is crazy. If the security officers are already there, why can't they just throw a couple cups of salt out? Again, it's for their own safety, but it also keeps from somebody else having to incur the time and cost of bringing in another employee. Recording things for engineering systems like heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, which is HVAC, for those who have not seen that before. Security people often take HVAC readings. Once every 2 hours, you go up to the penthouse above the building where the big fans are that are running the heating and cooling, and check the chart to make sure it's not in the red. If it is, that means the machinery is overheating and you need to call somebody. If you didn't do that, then somebody from engineering would need to be there 24/7 to watch the chart. So why not do those things as long as they don't impact your core mission? Be a helpful partner. Going back to that ESRM model, you will get many more positive conversations with those partners if you have something in your hip pocket that you might be able to do for them. And as long as it doesn't impact your core mission of security, you should be open to taking on something where you're best positioned to do it and save somebody else time and money. We had a discussion about leadership and management, and we looked at the G4S case as our example there. And leadership being, following through on the plans and rules you put in effect, and management is having the right rules and plans in effect. So it's not enough to simply write the rule book. You have to follow through on that and make sure it gets enforced. It's not enough to just enforce the rules if the rules themselves are not the right ones. Both are necessary. In the G4S case, we realized that regulations are few. Our article from the Pew Trust kind of solidified that, where there just aren't enough government regulations to regulate the security industry, specifically the security guard industry. Background checks and screening are key, and in many cases give you a clue to what is going on with the hiring, but in many cases they're just not done. You need to be specific in your contracts as to what you want. If you want to have people with a full background check before they get hired and another one every year, specify that in a contract. Doing so makes sure, and you have to be the one to follow through. Doing so makes sure that you at least do your due diligence to protect people. If you don't, and you rely on your guard company to do it, you may be disappointed. I think G4S, again, is a good company that made several errors, and any large guard company could probably be put in the same boat. They're giant companies. Things fall through the cracks. You, as a customer, need to also take your responsibility to ask for certain protections in your contracts to make sure that things don't fall through the cracks for your location, because that's the one you're concerned with. And finally, last week we did a unit on networking, which I hope you found to be productive. I know some of you already had LinkedIn accounts or solid networks being built as you go along, but many do not. And I was hoping that this particular unit would get you out of your comfort zone, and I'm finding out that it has. You network not just to find another job, but it keeps you connected to understand regulatory changes. Other people in the security industry will alert you when there's a change that may impact you. And if you have these connections, they'll send you a note. Hey, did you know that the law changed and the licensing requirement for guards is now going to include a physical exam starting next year? Well, if you just didn't pick that up out of thin air, someone may have to tell you that. And if one of your contacts understands that, they'll reach out to you, and you should do the same. It allows you to seek references on suppliers and prospective hires. Somebody's coming to work for you and they've worked someplace else and you have a good connection at that place. You can get an unvarnished view. You can call and say, hey, besides name, rank, and serial number, tell me about this person. Are they a good team player? Is there a value in me hiring them? Are they as good as their resume says they are? Right? The big one, though, and I think we all realize this, is to keep your job prospects open. On the networking so far, we have already 2 students who have potential job interviews from our networking just this week. It works. And as you saw from the reading in that unit, the majority of jobs are found not through want ads and not through Indeed.com, but through networking. Somebody understanding your value, expressing that to a hiring manager, and you getting the call. Continue networking. It's hugely important. Build a big network and use it effectively. Don't always be asking for favors. Always be the one offering favors as much as you can, and the reverse will come to you when you least expect it, when you most need it. So as I said, one of the reasons that we review is so we can have a reflection, so we can look back and say, what went right, what went wrong, what can we do better? And you should do that every day with everything you do. Make a list of the things that went right and the things that went wrong every day. And you'll notice after about 30 to 60 days that the same things end up on the list just about every day. Well, that tells you to continue to do the things that went right and fix the things that went wrong. It'll help you gauge the things that are making you successful and unsuccessful. Now, when I reflected on the work we did, I just went over what we did. But you're the ones who have to apply that, right? You're the ones who are going to be security managers at some point, be it cyber and the safety side, the organizational security side. In some way, you are going to be a manager, and you need to apply the things that we learned. So I reflected on what we worked on. I didn't really even reflect. I just went over a review of all the different units that we handled this semester, right? But you are the ones that have to apply it. So it's time for you to reflect on how you're going to do that. What I'd like you to think about is, what things did you learn of those units? And if that's the easiest way to break it down, that's fine. What did you learn that you might apply in your future practice? There's usually 2 or 3 things that in every semester, even if it's the worst course in the world, that you picked up and you said, that's kind of important for me to know in the future. This is stuff that's going to help me be good. The same way, there's 1 or 2 things, or even more, that were least impactful. You may look at them and say, Dr. Wisniewski, thank you very much for teaching us that, but I'm never going to use it. I'd like to know what those are. I'd like you to tell me what's good about the study of security management. Why is it important to study it? Why can't you just learn the basics of alarm systems, physical security, risk assessments, investigations, security law, all the things, personnel security, all the things that you learn to be a security manager? Why do you have to have a course that teaches you security management itself? Why is it good to study it holistically like that? And what could have been done better in this course? What was missing? What were you expecting that you didn't get that would be helpful to you in your future practice? I want you to reflect on those things, because we're going to have an assignment to kind of look those things over. So this week we're going to go light. I want you to be rested and refreshed for finals week. This isn't the only course you're taking. You're taking several others. I want you to be ready for all of your courses, ready for all of your exams. It's important that you do well in all of them, not just mine. So this is a really light assignment. There'll be a Dropbox assignment this week, and it is an outline. And I will have a specific model in the Dropbox. You just basically fill in the blanks or replace the cues that I have in there with 1 sentence or a few words even. And I'll ask you these questions, essentially, what's most impactful about the course? What are the things you're going to use? What did you find? Why did you find them interesting? What are you going to do with some of this information? And then what was least impactful? What things did you say, gosh, thanks for teaching me that, Doc, but it's nothing I'm ever going to use. I need to understand those too. I want you to tell me why you think, or why you don't think, the study of security management as a discipline is important. You take all your individual security courses, physical, personnel, security law, investigations, risk assessing, all of the security courses that you can take. Is a course in security management itself beneficial? Do you think it is? And why? Do you feel more secure, more confident than you did at the beginning of the semester, or do you think this is overwhelming? What could be improved in the course, and what thing would make the course better? And you're going to do that, obviously, in your anonymous evaluations, and I encourage you to do that. Please do. I make a lot of changes in my courses based on what you tell me in those things. But feel free to do it here, too, because then I know if it's something you're comfortable saying, I know who said it, and I can contact them and say, okay, what did you mean by that? Get more information so that I can make the course better in the future. So for this week, I need you to, now that you've finished the lecture, put your outline in the Dropbox by Friday at midnight. Yes, it's Friday, not Sunday. It's not a heavy lift. This is a short amount of work, but you need to do it Friday. Why? Because I want you to take a little bit of downtime. I can release the final to you on Saturday. That is SRU rules, and that is what I will do. But the final is not a heavy lift. It's a single paper. We will not have another test like a quiz type test. It is just the paper this term. Don't worry about telling me about how I can improve the course. You're really paying it forward for the next class by sharing those things with me, and I can take it. I'm a big boy. I hear bad news all the time. So don't worry about insulting me. I was born and raised in New York. I cannot be insulted. I'll discuss the format of the reflection paper in a lecture that will come out on Saturday. Just a real short one, probably 2 or 3 slides, just to make sure you understand what I'm expecting. And that's it. The lecture's done. Do that outline, put it in, and have it there by Friday. I will release the final exam on Saturday, and then you have until the end of the term, which is the day before Thanksgiving, to turn that back in. Can't take any late submissions on the final when it comes in, so we'll talk again before then. But between now and Friday, do that outline. It'll be helpful. Your final exam format's not going to be exactly like the outline, so please don't get started writing that. Think you're getting ahead. But it will be somewhat similar. But there will be nuances, and you'll be doing it twice if you jump too far ahead. Get the outline in by Friday. Saturday, you'll see the final, and have a great week.